This is a conversation I've been wanting to have for a very long time. The C7 Z06 versus the Shelby GT500. I've spent time with both cars, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the differences between the two cars, and if you're looking at getting one, which one you should get. Now, while we're standing outside of the car, just before we go for a drive, I do want to touch on topic number one, or category number one, and that's comparing the looks of the two cars. They are both so absolutely beautiful, and the GT500 we spent time with was also arguably one of the greatest specs you can get with that car, but this is going to be a subjective conversation here. I'm going to say the C7 Z06 takes it. You know, from a side profile on the GT500, it just doesn't look different enough from like a Mustang EcoBoost. Yes, it has the Shelby badge. Yes, it has the big spoiler. Yes, it has the big calipers, big brakes, but that's really about it. The C7, whether it's a Stingray or a Z06, it just looks like an absolute rocket ship. And I don't think anyone can argue that this car isn't absolutely beautiful. It gets a ton of attention and stands out big time. I mean, since we have the C7 Z06 in front of us, just look at this. Massive splitter, grille, heat extractor on the hood. This is wrapped. Not all C7 Z06s will have this, but that looks very nice. You have the red calipers, 19-inch wheels up front, 20 in the back. You have the C7 Z06 on the side with the Z in red, another vent. The roof is wrapped black, another vent here, another vent there, a stage 3 spoiler, and more vents in the back. I mean, this car is just vented up and angled up to literal perfection. Now, underneath the hood here, you're working with the LT4, 650 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, supercharged V8. The GT500 will also have a supercharged V8, but that thing makes 760 horsepower. But hold on, it's not all about just the horsepower, right? It's also about how much the car weighs, how it feels when you drive it, and we're going to talk about that. But both of them do have a supercharged V8, which makes them very, very comparable cars. With that being said, let's hop in the C7 Z06 and take it for a drive. All right, let's go ahead and hop in here. I had to move it out of the sun so you guys could actually see once I get in here. But interior presentation from both the C7 Z06 and GT500 are going to be very, very American. I mean, it's not over the top with the materials in the interior here, but it still has some very cool touches. These red seats on the white exterior look amazing. Nice Corvette on the door sill there. And let's go ahead, hop in here. Let's start it up. Now, the way that this cockpit is laid out is very, very different from the GT500. The GT500 has much more of just a casual display, but the C7 Z06 has everything just centered towards the driver. The way that the outline here makes you feel is just like you're in your own little jet ready to take off. And trust me, it's fair to call this thing a jet with the way it accelerates. But the GT500 does move as well. With that being said, hey, let's see how it does. And don't worry, we'll do many more pulls much harder than that in this video to get a feel for the C7 Z06. But wow, this thing can move. And okay, we're not downplaying the GT500 here. That car, well, let's address the elephant in the room, honestly, and that's going to be the transmission. First of all, if you are a manual person, you just live and die by manual cars, then the GT500, at least the S550 version of it, is not going to be an option for you. You're going to have to go with a 2014 or earlier than that, because those are the only GT500s that even come in manual, and actually manual is the only option with those models. But once the S550 GT500 came out, which is 2016 and beyond, or 2015 if we're including when EcoBoost were released and all that, yeah, they did away with the manual for good, and you're only left with a dual clutch automatic transmission. The C7 Z06, which we are in the automatic, which makes this a very good comparison, you don't get a dual clutch. And trust me, when you go from driving a GT500 to a C7 Z06, comparing the automatics, that is a huge plus to the GT500, because being able to click those paddles and have it shift immediately makes the driving experience so much better. I'll give you guys an example. Let's climb up to, let's go to third gear, and then watch. I'll click to go to second. Watch how long this takes. Oh, this car is rowdy. But as you can see, that was a solid like second and a half before the RPMs climbed up, and then it made that nice loud exhaust pop. Versus the GT500, that is instantaneous and really makes playing with the paddles a lot more satisfying when driving it. And if you just push down on the throttle, it is a lot more responsive too. So on the grounds of which car has a better transmission, this is going to be a tie for me. Again, because the S550 GT500 does not have a manual option, but the automatic transmission in that car is significantly better than what's in the C7 Z06. So because of that, these two cars, it's a tie with what has the better transmission. Now let's address which car is simply faster in a straight line. Well, let's start off by doing a huge pull on the C7 Z06. Oh, listen to that. Ready? This thing is insanity. Oh my gosh. And that is thanks to not only this having 650 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque, but the car weighs 3,500 pounds. Now, the GT500 has 760 horsepower. That's 110 more horsepower than the C7 Z06. But the GT500 weighs 4,100 pounds. Now, according to Google, the 0 to 60 in a C7 Z06 is 2.95 seconds. I'll tell you right now, that's not going to happen. Yeah, that's just simply not going to happen. You're going to need a prepped surface, absolutely perfect conditions, and still it's questionable if you would get that time. I've tested the 0 to 60 in multiple C7 Z06s, and I believe the best I ever got was like 3.5 seconds. Again, traction is just going to be an issue. It's getting colder now, especially, so you can see us fighting for traction even in second gear pulls. Same thing's going to happen in the GT500, because again, yeah, it's heavier, so you would expect better traction, but at the same time, it has more horsepower than this, so it balances each other out. Quarter mile time wise, the GT500 is working with between 10.6 seconds and 11.5 seconds, and the C7 Z06 is working with 10.9 seconds. The 10.9 seconds quarter mile on the C7 Z06, that's a lot more attainable than a 2.95 second 0 to 60 time. That makes these two cars fall right in line with each other. But if you look at roll races, C7 Z06 versus 2020 GT500, the GT500 does pull away from the C7 Z06. The dual clutch automatic transmission with 760 horsepower, yeah, it takes the win in a roll race. And again, you can watch those videos for yourself. All right, now that we're going around a little roundabout here to speak on the cornering of the two cars, well, the C7 Z06 takes the cake without a doubt. I mean, you can just whip this thing around. Obviously, with how powerful this car is, you have to be careful with your throttle input when you have the car into a corner. Same thing with the GT500, obviously. But this thing feels so much more nimble than the GT500. The GT500 is just a bigger, taller, wider, longer, heavier car than the C7 Z06. This thing's just lower to the ground and 600 pounds lighter than the GT500. You really feel the differences when you're driving it. Hold on 1 second, no cops. Good. Unbelievable to drive. Oh my gosh. You know, that makes the C7 Z06 sort of a better all-around package, right? because you really do want a car that can handle corners well. That's what a sports car is really about. And the GT500, don't get me wrong, it handles its 4,100 pounds really, really well. But when you drive these back to back, you go from a GT500 to a C7 Z06, you really feel the tossability in this car over the GT500. So if you are going to be spending your time in around curvy mountain roads, the C7 Z06 is going to be the car to get. But if you are somebody that just prides yourself on winning every single race, every single roll race that you do, yeah, the GT500 is the American representative of any roll race. That is the car you want to get. Now, I do want to touch on the differences in how these cars sound. So the C7 Z06, you know, by the way, they both have supercharged V8s, yet they sound very different. The C7 Z06 has much more of a deep, screaming, devilish sort of exhaust note, whereas the GT500 sounds a bit more raspy. So for me, acceleration goes to the GT500. That thing is, it is the king of American cars in terms of roll races. The sound, that's tough, but in terms of just drama and the experience, it goes to the C7 Z06. The looks go to the C7 Z06. The transmission's gonna be a tie, and reliability wise, this is a tough one. I have seen far more higher mileage C7 Z06s than I have high mileage GT500s. And that's kind of just a telltale sign of what's the more reliable car. You know, seems like it's the C7 Z06. The C7 Z06s, 2015 through 2017, they do have overheating issues. They have wheel cracking issues. That was a $4,000 fix on this particular example with getting the aftermarket wheels that this thing has on it right now. I have heard about some overheating in the GT500s as well. They seem to be kind of on par with in terms of what's the more reliable car. So seems like that's going to be a tie as well. But also, I do want to touch on the interior for a moment. Again, this has a much more cool sort of cockpit design. The GT500 also has kind of just a casual screen in the middle. You do get the fully customizable digital gauge cluster. Because of that, again, I have to go with another tie here. I like the cockpit design of the C7 Z06 much more than I do the GT500, but I like the gauge cluster and the steering wheel of the GT500 more than I do the C7 Z06. Hold on. These cars are on a pretty even playing field, and they're really right on par with price point as well. You know, if you're asking me which one I would get, that is a tough question to answer. Just because I've spent so much time with the C7 Z06, I would want the GT500 because I want to experience that car more. You know, have something that I'm a bit more unfamiliar with, just because, you know, driving something new is always better. Let me get the sun out of the way, hold on. So like I said, just because I've spent so much time with this car, I love every second of it. By the way, that is not the car that's already there. I would probably choose the GT500 just to get more familiar with that car, but the time I spent with the GT500 was an absolutely amazing experience. I mean, all in all, guys, I think the C7 Z06 does come out on top. Again, having the manual option is something that's still available, especially now with C8 Corvettes no longer offering that. The looks, and just the cornering that this thing can do, unlike the GT500. Again, GT500 is fantastic in cornering, but this thing, you feel the 600-pound difference. That's a lot of weight. All in all, guys, let me know if you could have either car for free. A C7 Z06, you get the key to this, or you get the GT500. Which one are you taking? You have to keep it forever, and you cannot sell it. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments, but those are my thoughts compared to the two cars. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.